You'll see both a standard and a lower carbon concrete being poured in this video. The key point is that they're placed and finished in exactly the same way, using normal site practices.
So the processes of typically laying concrete is that, you're going to do your site preparation. So we would have seen right at the beginning that we went from a dry sub-base to a wet sub-base. The reason behind that is that if it's a dry sub-base, what it will end up doing is it will just pull the moisture out of the concrete. And then what you'll end up having is you'll have dry concrete that won't have any water, won't have any strength, and if the wind picks up, you can have finishing issues. Then, like with everything, when the truck first turned up, as with any good site practices, they're going to have a chat with the foreman. You're going to figure out exactly how you're going to place it, the direction where the truck's going to go, so the communication's really effective so everyone knows what they're doing. They put on the appropriate amount of discharge chutes so that they can reach all the areas so that we're not overextending people. And one of the most important things too, especially when you're looking at these low carbon concretes, to ensure the performance is you want to have a tester there. So we would have seen the tester taking a sample of concrete. We went and slump tested the concrete and cylinders have been cast. And that should be done before you start placing the concrete so you know what that consistency is. So if you need to change it to get it to where you want it to be, then you can. And then typically after that, you start discharging into your formwork. Typically on a footpath like this, we don't use a vibrator. Because it's so thin, the vibrator might start disturbing the sub-base and it might come into the concrete. It's typically speaking below a 150 thick slab, even up to 175. Typically the size 9 or 15 size gummy boots that we had here is going to be enough to compact the concrete. And then you generally have somebody with a ruler or a shovel behind it, and all they're doing is just leveling off the concrete so that when the screeder comes through, they're not moving too much concrete. They're trying to create that levelness, what they do with the screed, and that's what you've seen with the guy that's sitting down moving the big long bar. And typically after that, what you want to do is you want to try and close the surface up, and we usually use that with a ball float, and that would be the big steel trowel. And again, that's just to help close up the surface to get it ready for finishing. That's also going to allow it to have a little bit of bleed water. And you need to have a little bit of bleed water just to keep the concrete surface alive from drying out. Because again, if it dries out prematurely, then you can have dryness on the top and you can have wet concrete underneath and you won't get a good finish. It's called a set differential. But as can be seen, that the ball float handled quite well. Then generally you're going to leave it for a little bit of a time just to let the concrete start to stiffen up a little bit. And then you just can start closing up the edges. And that's usually, you might use a frezzer just to help close it up, and then you use your edging tool. And then once you've edged it a little bit or on the edges, again, they generally might hit it again with a little bit of the ball float just to create this nice smooth surface now that the concrete's starting to stiffen up underneath. And then when it gets to a sufficient time, they'll run the broom over it, which gives you the textured finish, which is generally required for a footpath. And then they'll just put another edge around it just to tidy it up to make it nice and smooth. Once they finish doing that and the concrete's sort of sat there for a few hours starting to set and gain some early age strength, they'll place a curing compound on it, which is one of the most important things with concrete. The curing compound is going to put a sealant on the surface that stops any water evaporating out of the concrete. By keeping the water in the concrete, we're going to keep the strength up. We're going to keep the durability, we're going to close and reduce the porosity or how much water can get through the concrete. So curing is one of the most fundamentally missed opportunities within the concrete industry to protect concrete. And then once that's done, they'll come back and probably take the formwork off tomorrow, and they'll let the concrete just sit there until they're ready for it to open. That's sort of a rough run through of roughly how we would put down a concrete footpath.